the Appalachian snake through the dense woods of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a ribbon of pale earth barely visible beneath the thick canopy. My name is Ranger Jack Harding, and this is my domain. For 15 years, I've patrolled these trails, a solitary figure in a green uniform against a backdrop of ancient trees and whispering streams. People call me a park ranger, but some days I feel more like a guardian, watching over something old and wild that most folks can't even begin to understand. I'm not your typical granola-munching, tree-hugging ranger. Don't get me wrong, I respect nature, but I also respect its teeth. The Smokies aren't some manicured garden, they're raw, untamed wilderness. Black bears roam free, coyotes howl in the valleys. And the mountains themselves seem to breathe with a life of their own. And then there are the stories, the whispers in the wind, that the locals tell tales of things older than the park. Things that watch from the shadows. I usually dismiss them as folklore, the kind of yarns spun around campfires to spook tourists. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the silence of the woods presses down, even I, a seasoned ranger, can feel a prickle of unease. It's a feeling like being watched. A sense that something is just beyond the edge of the firelight, something that doesn't belong in the neat little boxes of our understanding. This feeling was particularly strong last fall. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a change in the air pressure before a storm. Trails that were usually bustling with hikers became eerily quiet. Animals grew skittish, their calls echoing with a frantic edge. And then the disappearances started. At first, it was just hikers who wandered off trail, the kind of incidents that happen every year. But these were different. No trace, no scent, just gone, like they'd been swallowed by the mountains themselves. The Park Service launched searches, of course. Helicopters buzzed overhead, search dogs strained at their leashes, and volunteers combed the undergrowth. We found nothing. It was as if the missing had simply ceased to exist. The official reports blamed accidents, disorientation, animal attacks, anything to avoid the real, unspoken fear that was beginning to grip the park. I tried to stay grounded in logic, to find rational explanations. But the woods had a different story to tell. A story whispered in the rustling leaves, etched in the deepening shadows, and carried on the chilling wind that snaked it through the valleys. A story was about to become terrifyingly real. The first truly unsettling incident happened on the Chimney Tops Trail, one of the park's most popular hikes. A young couple, eager to catch the sunrise, had set out before dawn. They were experienced hikers, well-equipped, the kind who leave detailed itineraries and stick to the marked paths. Yet they vanished. Their abandoned car was found at the Trailhead parking lot, still locked, backpacks and water bottles inside. Search teams scoured the chimney tops, rappelling down cliffs, pushing through rhododendron thickets, calling out their names until their voices were hoarse. Nothing. It was as if they had evaporated into the morning mist. Then came the video. A solo hiker, a tech-obsessed kid from Knoxville, had been live streaming his trick on YouTube. He was aiming for Clingman's Dam, the highest point in the park, and had his phone mounted on a chest strap, capturing his every breath and stumble. His stream was popular, attracting a few dozen viewers who peppered him with questions and encouragement in the chat. I reviewed the footage myself, along with a few other rangers, hoping for a clue, anything that could explain the disappearances. For the first few hours, it was mundane hiker stuff, scenic vistas, panting breaths, the crunch of boots on the trail. Then, as he climbed higher, things started to change. The air grew colder even for late autumn. A thick fog, unnatural in its suddenness, rolled in, swallowing the sunlight and turning the vibrant forest into a monochrome world of grey and shadow. The hiker, oblivious or perhaps too engrossed in his stream, kept going, his cheerful chatter faltering slightly as the visibility dropped to near zero. And then it appeared, just a flicker at the edge of the frame, a fleeting distortion in the fog. Something tall, impossibly thin, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. It was there for less than a second, a ghost in the static, before vanishing back into the mist. The hiker, thankfully, didn't seem to notice. He kept walking, his breath clouding in the frigid air, narrating his now spooky surroundings to his viewers. But we saw it. We rewound the footage, played it in slow motion, zoomed in until the pixels blurred. There it was, undeniable, a shape that defied easy explanation. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't human, not quite, it was wrong. Too elongated, too spindly, its movements too disjointed. It was like something from a nightmare, a creature assembled from spare parts in the dark corners of the woods. We debated what it could be. A bear, distorted by the fog and camera angle. A prank, mass hysteria, but none of it fit the shape, the way it moved, the sheer wrongness of it chilled us to the bone. We tried to contact the hiker, to warn him, but it was too late. His live stream abruptly cut out a few minutes after the sighting. Static filled the screen, then nothing. He was gone, just like the couple on chimney tops. Vanished without a trace. The video, that fleeting glimpse of the impossible, became our grim secret. We buried it in official reports, labelled it as unidentified anomaly, and locked it away in digital archives. The Park Service, desperate to avoid panic, doubled down on the accidental disappearances narrative. But we rangers, the ones who knew the woods, we knew better. We had seen something in that fog, something that defied logic and reason. And we knew, with a cold certainty that settled deep in our guts, that whatever it was still out there, lurking in the shadows of the Great Smoky Mountains, and it was hungry. After the hiker vanished on Klingman's Dome, a palpable dread settled over the park. The remaining hikers, sensing the shift in atmosphere, thinned out. Trails that were once bling with chatter and laughter became eerily silent. Even the birds seemed to sing with less enthusiasm, their melodies muted hesitant. We rangers were on edge, jumpy at every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a twig. We started patrolling in pairs, our radios crackling with nervous updates. Flashlights cut through the deepening twilight, but the darkness felt deeper, more oppressive than usual, as if the shadows themselves were watching us. The disappearances continued, though less frequently now. People were staying away, heeding the unspoken warnings carried on the wind. Those who did venture into the woods were seasoned locals, hunters and trappers who knew the mountains like the backs of their hands. They were armed, cautious, and deeply superstitious. It was one of these locals, Old Man Jedidiah, who brought us the first concrete clue. Jedidiah was a mountain man through and through, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by sun and wind, his eyes sharp and knowing as a hawk's. He'd been trapping fox in the back country, miles from any marked trail, when he found it. He stumbled upon a clearing, a small, unnatural circle in the dense woods where the trees seemed to lean away as if repelled. In the center of the clearing, nestled amongst the fallen leaves, was a structure. Crude, unsettling, built from branches and scavenged bones. It was like a grotesque mockery of a bird's nest, but far too large, and imbued with a sense of wrongness that made Jedidiah's skin crawl. He didn't touch it. Jedidiah wasn't a fool. He recognized the signs, the subtle disturbances in the natural order that spoke of something ancient and malevolent. He marked the location on his map, his hand trembling slightly, and hiked straight to the ranger station. When Jedidiah described the structure, a chill ran through the room. We knew instinctively that this was connected to the disappearances. We organized an expedition, a small, heavily armed team of rangers, with Jedidiah as our guide. The hike to the clearing was oppressive. The woods seemed to close in around us, the air thick and stagnant. An unnatural silence hung heavy, broken only by the frantic thump of our own hearts. Even Jedidiah, usually stoic and unflappable, was visibly unnerved, his eyes darting nervously into the shadows. We found the clearing exactly as he described. The structure was even more disturbing up close. The bones were animal bones, mostly deer and bear, but some were too delicate, too slender, to be from any creature we recognized. They were interwoven with branches, lashed together with strips of bark, and something that looked disturbingly like dried sinew. As we circled the structure, examining it with a mixture of morbid fascination and growing horror, we heard it, a sound, faint at first, barely audible above the rustling leaves, but growing steadily louder, a whisper. Not human, not animal, but something in between. A sibilant, breathy murmur that seemed to slither through the trees, wrapping around us like icy tendrils. The whisper spoke no words we could understand, but its tone was unmistakable. Hunger, patience, and a cold, ancient malice that promised something terrible was coming. The whisper intensified, swirling around us in the clearing, a chilling caress that raised goosebumps on our skin, even through our thick ranger uniforms. We drew our weapons, adrenaline surging, our training kicking in despite the primal fear that threatened to overwhelm us. Jedidiah, his face pale but resolute, pointed deeper into the woods. "It's close," he rasped, his voice barely audible above the whispering wind. "Closer than you think." We moved as a unit, rangers flanking Jedidiah, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive gloom. The whispering grew louder, morphing into a chorus of sibilant sounds, like dry leaves skittering across stone, or bones rattling in the wind. The trees seemed to writhe and twist in the periphery, their shadows dancing with unnatural animation. Then we saw it. Not a flicker this time, Not a fleeting glimpse, but the thing itself standing at the edge of the clearing, framed by the gnarled branches of an ancient oak. It was taller than any man, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and spindly like a grotesque marionette. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched taut over sharp angles and jutting bones. And its face, it had no face, not as we understood it. Where features should have been, there was only a smooth, featureless expanse of pale skin, broken only by two dark, gaping holes that served as eyes. Eyes that burned with a cold, predatory light, fixed on us with an unnerving intensity. The creature moved, unfolding itself from the shadows with a jerky, disjointed grace that was both mesmerizing and horrifying. It glided towards us, its limbs moving in ways that defied human anatomy, its featureless face tilted slightly, as if listening to the whispers that seemed to emanate from its very being. We opened fire. The woods erupted with a deafening roar of shotguns and rifles. The air thick with the smell of gunpowder. Bullets ripped through the trees, tearing bark and shredding leaves. But the creature, it seemed to flow through the gunfire, its movements too swift, too erratic to track. It closed the distance with terrifying speed, the whispering intensifying into a deafening shriek that clawed at our minds, a sound that spoke of ancient hunger and bottomless malice. Rangers fell screaming, clawing at their faces, their bodies contorting in unnatural ways. The creature moved among us. A pale blur in the chaos, its touch leaving behind a trail of broken bodies and shattered minds. I emptied my magazine, the recoil slamming into my shoulder, but it was like shooting at smoke. The bullets passed through it, around it, seemingly without effect. It was immune to our weapons, impervious to our attacks. This was something beyond bullets and steel, something ancient and primordial, a creature of nightmare-made flesh. Jedediah, his eyes wide with terror and a strange, grim resignation, grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Ranger," he yelled over the cacophony, "we can't fight it. It's the hunger in the fog, we have to run." He was right. We were outmatched, outgunned, facing something that defied all logic and reason. Survival was our only option. We turned and fled, scrambling back through the woods, the creature's shrieking whispers echoing behind us, urging us on, promising a fate worse than death. We ran until we burst from the trees, stumbling into the relative safety of the ranger station, our lungs bounding, our hearts pounding, our minds reeling from the horror we had witnessed. Half our team was gone, lost to the creature in the woods. Jedediah, his face etched with a grief that went beyond words, simply shook his head. "They'll keep hunting," he murmured, his voice hollow. "The mountains are hungry, and they won't be satisfied for long." The disappearances stopped after that, not because the creature was gone, but because no one dared to enter the woods anymore. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park, once a haven of natural beauty, became a place of fear, a silent, haunted wilderness where the whispers of the hungry fog still echo in the trees. And we rangers, the few who survived, we are left to guard the edges, to warn people away, to live with the knowledge of what lurks in the shadows, waiting for the fog to roll in again. This is Ranger Jack Harding, signing off. And if you ever find yourself hiking in the Smokies, and the fog starts to thicken, and you hear whispers on the wind, turn back. Don't look back. Just run. Because some things in this world are best left undisturbed, and some hungers are never truly satisfied.